Okay, let's get started. So, hi everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for this release of US PERG Education Fund's new electronic waste graveyard. This is an interactive database which features over 100 products that have become obsolete because the manufacturer stopped providing software updates or online server support since 2014. So I want to share why we built this database, what it means for consumers and the environment, and then we're going to hear from Paul Roberts from the Secure and Resilient Future Foundation about the security implications of software obsolescence. I'll give a quick demo of the database, and then we'll have time for questions if folks have any. So a little bit of background, we launched our Design to Last campaign because increasingly we're pushed to trash tech that should still work. Everything from Chromebooks, phones, and smart home devices, just because software has expired or manufacturers have ended support. When manufacturers stop providing security updates or end server support, consumers are pushed to throw out expensive tech that should still work. And we just don't get what we pay for when we lose features or basic functionality altogether. It's also a huge problem for our environment. In the US, we throw out over 500 pounds of electronic waste every second and over 400,000 phones every day. While we wish we could recycle our way out of this problem, the UN found that tech manufacturing is growing 5 times faster than our ability to recycle. So the best way to reduce the environmental impact of our tech is to use things for as long as possible and make less stuff, especially with the volatile trade situation, which raises costs for American consumers. Keeping things in use helps Americans get their money's worth. That's why we made this electronic waste graveyard, to show the significance of how obsolete software is wasting our money, ripping us off, and filling up landfills with electronic waste. The waste from each of these products adds up and is harming the planet and consumers through a death by 1,000 cuts. This database shows that we can't ignore this problem. So it lists over 100 products that have been pushed to an early grave because manufacturers ended software support or cut cloud services. It calculates the total weight of all of these dead devices, which have joined the 68 million tons of electronic waste disposed of each year. Our key finding is that at least 130 million pounds of electronic waste has been created by manufacturers who made devices with expiring software, canceled cloud services, or added new subscriptions for basic features since 2014. This is a conservative estimate based on publicly available data, which we use to estimate sales for each product in the graveyard. And we know this list of over 100 products isn't exhaustive even since 2016 or 2014, and that more products will die in the future. So we plan to add products to the graveyard as they become obsolete and update that e-waste estimate. In terms of the database itself, we categorized each product into one of several categories, like smart home product, phones, laptops, VR, and wearables. The database is sorted with the shortest lived products first, and we also categorized how the product became obsolete. So when manufacturers end software security updates, we think of that as a slow death, because products don't immediately stop working, but they become vulnerable to attacks and eventually stop being able to access the websites and applications that consumers need. The best example for this type of obsolescence are Chromebooks. So our Chromebook churn report from 2023 found that Google Chromebooks have expiration dates after which software support ends. As soon as they stop being able to, soon after they lose that software support and those security updates, they stop being able to access websites, including state testing websites. And after parents, teachers, and students called on Google to change in response to our report, Google announced that all Chromebooks will last for 10 years. When products rely on cloud service and server support, and when that ends, they often instantly stop working. So we call these a quick death, whether because the product didn't sell as well as the manufacturer hoped, as in the case of the Spotify car thing, which lasted about 3 years, or because the company itself goes bankrupt, as is the case for the embodied Moxie robot, an $800 emotional support robot for kids, which lasted 4.7 years before it died. Manufacturers pull support and these tech products go dark, with consumers left with an expensive paperweight. A few products also became e-waste because they got their basic functionality locked behind a subscription. And so consumers just couldn't actually use the features that they were sold when they bought the product without paying this new fee. We counted those as well. So we'll hear from Paul in a second, and then I'll demo the graveyard. But I just wanted to end on 3 solutions that will prevent the e-waste graveyard from growing. The first is that at the very least, consumers have a right to know how long products will last before they buy them. Early adopters could know what they were getting into, and those of us who just want to use something that works will stay away from these short-lived products. Manufacturers will also be able to compete on longevity, and no one will have to rip out all the smart home products they spent thousands of dollars installing when they stop working. Consumer Reports, US PIRG, the Secure Resilient Future Foundation, and the Center for Democracy and Technology released the Connected Consumer Products End of Life Disclosure Act in March, which would provide this transparency. I'm going to put that link in the chat as well so that folks can learn more about what that would do. Just put that in here. The second thing is that we need the right to reuse the tech we've bought and owned. So if it's no longer financially viable for manufacturers to support the software or servers that keep a product running, we should be able to install whatever we want on it. There are some really inspiring examples of enthusiasts keeping their Spotify car things running or older Android phones secure, but manufacturers often make it very difficult or impossible to install new software on their obsolete devices. So when manufacturers decide they're not going to support something, folks without technical skills should be able to install whatever they'd like with a couple of clicks. That's when we'd really have the right to reuse what we've bought. And the third solution here is just to keep Windows 10 in use. So Windows 10 expires in October. We estimate it could push up to 400 million PCs that can't upgrade to Windows 11 into an early grave. We already delivered over 20,000 petition signatures to Microsoft, and we were excited to see that the company is allowing schools and for the first time individuals to pay for 3 years of extended security updates. But the best way for Microsoft to keep these PCs in use and meet their climate pledge would be to extend support to everyone automatically. Windows 10 is still on the majority of PCs around the world, according to StatCounter, and there's still time for Microsoft to extend support. Windows 10 is listed as the last entry on our electronic waste graveyard, and we estimate that up to 400 million PCs that can't upgrade to Windows 11 will generate 1.6 billion pounds of electronic waste. So those are the three solutions. I'll pass it off to Paul Roberts, the president of the Secure and Resilient Future Foundation, to share about the security concerns that come from obsolete devices. Then I'll do a quick demo, and we'll have some time for Q&A. So Paul, take it away.
Here we go. Can you hear me? Great. And slide is up.
Yeah, looks good.
Okay, thanks. Sorry. Welcome everyone. My name is Paul Roberts, and thanks to Lucas. Great overview of what's going on. I am the president of the Secure Resilient Future Foundation. I'm just background on me, longtime cybersecurity reporter, editor, industry analyst. Been really focused on the Internet of Things in security, and that goes back more than a decade. And I got really involved in the right to repair movement back in 2018, and founded a group called Secure Repairs, which is a group of around 400 cybersecurity pros who support right to repair. It's kind of a network of cybersecurity people. Gary McGraw testified at Nixing the Fix, which is the FTC conference back in 2019. I testified, that's what this picture is, in 2023 at a congressional hearing, House congressional hearing. Is there a right to repair? It's kind of taking a look at the right to repair question. And then in 2024, last year, I got together with a bunch of cybersecurity and consumer rights advocates to form Secure Resilient Future Foundation, because the reality is, and I think this announcement today and the EOL Graveyard points to this, that even with a right to repair, there are issues that really impede the ability of consumers to get the most life and use and value out of the smart, connected, software-driven stuff that they purchase. So Secure Resilient Future Foundation, we're a C4 nonprofit, and we're working basically to advance the public interest in a software-driven world, in particular by supporting the work of cybersecurity professionals. So digging into security flaws that might be in smart connected stuff in your homes and businesses. And also just promoting policies like the one Lucas mentioned with Consumer Reports and PIRG and Center for Democracy and Technology that foster a more secure, transparent, resilient future as smart connected stuff kind of flows into our homes, our businesses, our communities, right? We need the same rights as consumers that we've gotten over the years around our automobiles, right? And the stuff that we buy, the food that we buy and the other products that we buy. We need new policies and ideas to govern the types of restraints or impediments that improperly managed or improperly created software can create. And that's kind of what SURF, Secure Resilient Future Foundation, is all about. So I'll put the link, the URL, into the chat. One of the things we're really focused on is actually this end of life problem, and not just for the consumer rights angle of it, which is, you bought a refrigerator that's got a 20-year lifespan. The vendor only wants to support the software that runs it for 5 years. What do you do for the other 15 years? What are your rights as a consumer? What are the obligations of the vendor? Totally Wild West right now. Uncharted territory. Vendor can sell you a product, stop supporting the software, like Lucas said. 6 months down the road, a year down the road, can brick the device and turn it into a big 400-pound paperweight in your kitchen. Nothing preventing them from doing that. One of the things that often gets overlooked is there's actually a huge cybersecurity risk that goes along with vendors, manufacturers ending support for smart connected stuff. And what's called end of life or end of support, it's basically a point in time, kind of arbitrary, up to the manufacturer to decide, where they will stop providing software updates and, importantly, security patches for the software that runs the device. And again, this is at the discretion of the vendor. Some vendors like Apple and Microsoft have, decade or more of software support for the stuff they sell. Others could be a year, could be months. Totally unknown, and unknown to the person who buys the product when they buy it. From a malicious actor's standpoint, however, these devices that are internet connected and that are end of life, so not receiving software patches, become huge targets because they have known exploitable vulnerabilities lurking in the firmware or the embedded software that runs the device. And we've seen this play out already with what are called SOHO, small office, home office routers. These are basically the broadband routers probably in your home, providing you internet access, and that are internet connected, maybe given to you by your ISP. Maybe you purchase it yourself. It's a Wi-Fi router, but it hasn't received a software update, and maybe the hardware is no longer supported. That is now internet connected and vulnerable. And we've seen actors like Bolt Typhoon, which is a Chinese advanced persistent threat group, specifically target these devices, exploit them, take them over, so get administrative control and access to them, and then use them as a foundation for other attacks. So that could be a password spraying attack to break into a defense contractor or a sensitive government agency. It could be a denial of service attack. So let's get 100,000 or 1 million of these routers to start sending traffic to some site that we want to knock offline and cause huge internet disruption. Or to exfiltrate data. So we're on this sensitive government network or sensitive defense contractor network or critical infrastructure product. We want to get data off of it, but if we send it directly to our server in China, that's going to be a big red flag. So we're going to send it to a suburban home in Virginia. That's not going to set off any red flags, and then we'll get it to our server in China. So that's what we're seeing done with end-of-life devices, and the result is bad for all of us who rely on the internet, who rely on services to power our modern lives. We've also seen these devices used in actual kind of nation state campaigns. There was one targeting critical systems on the island of Guam that relied on a botnet of end of life consumer devices. And we've also seen, going back even to like 2016, 2017, things like the Mirai botnet that basically relied totally on compromised home and end-of-life devices. So there's a huge cybersecurity risk that goes along with all of these, with these smart connected devices, and that requires smart policies to address that risk, right? One of the things that I keep pointing out is, you look at the broadband router and it underscores the need for, this is where you need policy, where you need laws, because the vulnerability, if you have a vulnerable broadband router as a homeowner, as long as you continue to stream Netflix and so forth, might not matter to you that the Chinese are on your router. The ISP doesn't really matter. It's not disrupting their network. It's just a home router, right? The manufacturer, they've already walked away. They've already said they're not supporting this. So it's kind of like not our business anymore. So who owns that problem of a compromised home router? Well, we as a society do, because the impact of 1 million or 100,000 or 500,000 compromised home routers could be felt by all of us, right? If they take out critical infrastructure, if they compromise a government agency and steal our sensitive data, which they've already done, that impacts all of us. It leaves us vulnerable to theft and attack. It leaves us vulnerable to disruptive cyber attacks. And there need to be rules and regulations and guidance for manufacturers, for infrastructure providers like ISPs, to address these risks. And there needs to be transparency for consumers to say, if you've got looking at 3 broadband routers or 3 webcams, why not compare them based on how long the software will be supported, how long you'll receive security updates, and what options you'll have when the vendor decides to stop offering support, right? That's a perfectly valid way to make a decision about which product to buy. Right now, you have no access to any of that information, so you can't make that decision. And there's no incentive for vendors to do more rather than less when it comes to software support. So that's what my group, Secure Resilient Future Foundation, is focused on. We're working with PIRG, and we're working with Consumer Reports and Center for Democracy and Technology to get this introduced into state legislatures and on Capitol Hill, and ideally get it passed so that consumers have more understanding, visibility, transparency around something like software support and security updates, and can make informed decisions. Part of the draft, the model legislation we introduced with Consumer Reports also specifically addressed this issue around the vulnerable home routers by requiring ISPs to replace devices that they've leased or sold to customers that are end of life at no cost to the consumer. So they leased you or sold you a home router. It's now been declared end of life by the vendor. Now up to the ISP to give you a new one that is updatable and secure at their cost, not your cost. So these are the types of, we need more laws like this. We need a wider range of laws like this to start balancing things and empowering consumers in a software-driven world. Thanks.
Thanks, Paul. And I'm going to give a quick demo about how to use the e-waste graveyard and highlight some products. And I also just wanted to shout out Katie Shea, who is an intern at the Secure and Resilient Future Foundation, who helped contribute to the e-waste graveyard.
Katie did a great job. Thank you.
Yeah. So again, this database lists over 100 products that have been pushed to an early grave because manufacturers have ended software support, cut cloud services, or locked basic features behind a subscription. I'm going to share my screen now so we can just look at it, and then you will have time to play with it as much as you want now that it is live as well. So there's a couple of different categories here in the e-waste graveyard that we put for each type of product. You can filter by things like wearables and PCs, phones, smart home devices. Each device then gets its own gravestone with its launch date and death date, as well as a timeline for how long it was in use. The bottom lists our categorization for how this product died, either a quick death from a lack of server support or a slow death from a lack of software updates. And then some products also died because they locked basic features that were available for purchase behind a new subscription fee. And you can click each gravestone to see the lifespan for that product, the photo, its price, and more information on how it died. So let me just highlight a couple of products here that I think are kind of worth looking at. So the shortest lived product on our list is the Amazon Halo Rise. This was a $140 smart clock and sort of radio thing that was launched in late 2022. It was killed off in August 2023 when Amazon ended its Halo division. So the product required server support and it suffered a quick death. Amazon did offer consumer refunds for this product because they'd purchased it less than a year ago, but refunds don't stop this fancy alarm clock from becoming electronic waste. I want to highlight the Pixel 1 as well. This was a $650 smartphone launched in 2016 by Google that only received official security updates for 3 years before dying a slow death in 2019. For a different type of product, I just want to highlight the sous vide cooker from Mello. So this was a $400 kitchen tool that was launched in 2017 that lost its basic functionality in 2020 after a subscription fee was introduced. So the smart timing and scheduling features now required a monthly subscription about 3 years after it was launched. Those were features that were advertised in the initial launch of the product and that consumers had for those initial 3 years, only to be locked behind a monthly fee. And then one of the newest products that's been added to the e-waste graveyard is the Oral-B Guide Smart Toothbrush, which sold for $230 when it was launched in 2020 and lost its basic functionality about 3.5 years later in February of 2024. So Oral-B bricked the Guide's ability to set up Alexa by discontinuing the Oral-B Connect app, which was required to complete the process. This was a smart toothbrush where the base could be used as an Alexa smart speaker. Guide owners can still use the Oral-B app for other features, but the ability to use the charging base like an Alexa smart speaker, a big draw in the product's announcement and advertising, is seriously limited. And lastly, I just wanted to highlight a future grave plot that we are keeping ready for the up to 400 million PCs that can't upgrade from Windows 10 to Windows 11. So that's the last tombstone here in our graveyard. Windows 10 will expire in October of this year, leaving millions of PCs vulnerable to attacks or pushed into an early grave, even though they work just fine. And again, this is a problem that Microsoft could just solve today by extending support for Windows 10 for everyone to meet their climate pledge, reduce the environmental impact, and just make sure that people can use tech that should still work. So I will end it there. The link to the graveyard I'll post in the chat, and you should be redirected after this webinar ends as well. But I'm wondering if folks have any questions, attendees on the webinar. You should be able to raise your hand. Yeah, so I see Carice is on there. Let me just post that link. And then I'll just let you ask your question. And you can ask it to me or to Paul, or whoever you think is best. Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, Lucas. Hi, Paul. Thank you all.
Hi.
I'm a reporter with Investigate TV Gray Media, and I just think this is so vital, especially because we run a consumer franchise called Watching Your Wallet to help consumers save a dollar and promote and talking about policies like this. So I really appreciate it. I love that you all have this, and I was wondering, how should people and consumers dispose of electronic waste once things are not in use anymore? That is still environmentally friendly, right? Because I think you guys highlighted such an important part. I just had to update my iPhone because the model that I had, I couldn't get apps anymore, right? And it's so unfortunate. And so right now I have just a phone sitting on my desk at home, right? So
Right.
I don't want to throw it away because I don't know how to particularly throw it away, but how would you advise people and consumers to dispose of these products so that they're still making sure the environment is safe? Thank you again.
Yeah, great question. I'm sorry to hear about your phone, but this is a really common problem, right? That people are forced to throw out a phone that they don't want to because they can't use the apps they need for work. The first thing is don't put it in your junk drawer with all your other old e-waste that is just sitting around. Because unfortunately, although we all have that, the best thing to do is to make sure that it gets disposed of properly and ideally recycled as quickly as possible. The longer it sits in that junk drawer, the less valuable it will become and the less likely it is to actually be recycled. So the first thing is, if it works at all, especially for phones, there are great nonprofits like Digitunity that you can donate to that might be able to give it to someone who needs it. If Digitunity will not take it, or there's no sort of nonprofit that can use it or refurbish it or give it to someone else in need, you want to make sure that it's collected responsibly. So we recommend looking at calltorecycle.com. Lots of cities and states have safe e-waste disposal events where you can bring your electronic waste and have it disposed of properly. it's definitely better to recycle than not. We say that the worst recycling is better than the best landfilling, but the best thing is to keep things in use as problems. So for now, that's the best we can do as consumers. Ultimately, we need to push manufacturers to make sure that we don't have to throw stuff out that should still work. So I don't know if you have something to add there, Paul.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's right. And I mean, I think one of the problems is there's only so much we can do from a local or community basis. Like we need honestly, in this country, in the United States, we need a federal policy to encourage reuse and recycling that, provides the resources to help individuals find a place for that phone, whether it's reusing it, giving it to a charity, or responsibly recycling it so that it isn't just dumped in a landfill. But I mean, I think one of the things we struggle with is that just doesn't exist. It really varies greatly depending on where you live. And, so much of our recycling is really just driven by kind of like commodity prices and, it's just, yeah. So a lot of work to do there, but yes, there's also, I should say, there's a growing market for used electronics. Places like Back Market will often take old hardware and resell it. They'll give you money for it. Or if it's you might go to the manufacturer or the original manufacturer, and even if they won't give you money for it, they will take it for you and responsibly recycle it. So that's an option as well.
Yeah, those are some good options too. And this my smartphone now is from Back Market, so refurbished definitely is a great way. When you do have to replace something, you can buy refurbished. Okay, we have a couple of other questions in the chat. Thank you. So Ben is asking, are there any companies that are on the right side of history in terms of e-waste avoidance and longevity, which is a good question. It depends on different categories, and oftentimes manufacturers that are good in one aspect are bad in other aspects. I will give Google some credit for extending support for Chromebooks to 10 years after our Chromebook churn report. I think that 10 years is at this point a pretty exciting length of time to support a laptop. And it's something that, is sort of worth highlighting and saying thank you for responding to parents and teachers and IT professionals that called on them to extend support. In terms of smartphones, it is the case that although Apple restricts repair in lots of different ways, and they often use software to restrict repair, they do provide software support for a decent amount of time. And in fact, I think deserve some credit as well for pushing out a security update on a phone that had already been listed as obsolete by their own metric, just to make sure that it was secure. So we need to see more of that, where manufacturers say, hey, this bug is really a problem. And even though we weren't intending to continue releasing new features for this device, we're going to push out the security update to make sure that consumers can keep using it safely. But I would say no one's nailing it in all sectors. There's little bright spots. I don't know if Paul, you have any other thoughts.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's why there is the push for rules and regulations that govern this. Because certainly, if you look at history, if you look at car safety, right? If we had just left it up to car manufacturers, they would never have invested in the types of safety features, anti-lock brakes, airbags, and so on, right? Because that would have seemed like a distraction from cool new features or designs that consumers. They did it because they were required to do it, and I think we need new policies that tilt the scales more in favor of consumers and sustainability and reuse. And then once we plant those flags, manufacturers and their products will start to tack in that direction and reflect those requirements. But there are manufacturers who do better than others. If we simply leave it up to the marketplace, we're not going to get what we want. Yeah.
Well said. Yeah. And then Ben, I would just also highlight some open source products. So things like open source projects, rather, things like Home Assistant, right? Really allow people to use smart home devices for longer than otherwise. But it can often require a high level of technical expertise. And we really want to make it easy for people to do this rather than something that you need to be an enthusiast to accomplish. Okay. So last question here. Ernie is asking, how much of this is consumer education over software support? So in the case of Windows 10, could awareness of alternatives like Linux or Chrome OS Flex help protect consumers? And what could companies do to better communicate these points to consumers? I don't think it's unreasonable for consumers to think that the product that they buy should keep working and not have to be thrown out just because the software has expired or the server support has ended. So part of this is transparency, right? As we talked about, this model legislation that would give consumers the education they need to know when software loses support, and manufacturers should be informing consumers when that support ends so that they can remain safe. But ultimately, putting the expectation on every consumer to install alternative softwares is not going to be the way that we reduce the environmental harm or protect consumers from this problem. We need manufacturers to sell a product that lasts. That's what it means to buy something, and that's what it means to buy something with consumer protections in this country, is that you get what you pay for. And if I buy something and I expect it to work only to have it stop working, I'm being ripped off.
Yeah.
So Paul, I
Yeah.
don't know if you have something to add.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and obviously what Perg is amazing at is sort of educating. I do think there's a job to be done of educating the public and consumers when they're going out to Best Buy or some other store to start thinking in terms of things like software support. Labeling requirements would really help with that. But I do think we need to reframe this era of smart software driven stuff to be like, yeah, there are cool features, but there are also issues that go along with that. Those features that you're paying money for now may disappear in 3 months, with no recourse for you. And like, that's something you should really care about as a consumer. You should be putting pressure on your elected representatives to make it so it's not that way. And you should definitely be evaluating those types of things when you're looking at one product versus another, and keep that in mind. So there is a big piece about educating consumers of like, what does it mean to have a smart, internet connected, software driven product? It's different from when these things were purely mechanical. Cool new features, yes, but also risks, cybersecurity risks, availability risks, that you need to be aware of.
Yeah, I think that's totally right. Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions, so I think we can end it there. Thanks so much for joining us. Please, play with, enjoy the e-waste graveyard. Inevitably, more products will die, and we will have to add new products to the electronic waste graveyard. And so please send that to us. We can add them, and we might be, letting people know when we add new products and also updating that e-waste count when more products die.
Lucas, I just wanted to thank you and Perg for doing this. This is super important. It provides a place for people to go to keep track of this problem, which is a growing problem. Unfortunately, this graveyard is going to be getting bigger, folks. And Perg, Lucas, thank you so much for spearheading this and making it happen.
Yeah. Thanks, Paul, for your work.